Hi, I'm Aaron and welcome to my channel. So this video is about setting healthy boundaries in relationships. And I have to start by saying that I am not a therapist. I'm going to be talking about my own experiences of navigating unhealthy relationships. So if you need support, then please reach out to a mental health professional. So, I've opened up in the past, that I struggled with my mental health. I've suffered from depression, anxiety, amongst other mental health conditions. I underwent weight loss surgery in 2024, and now that I'm a lot happier within myself, I can recognize that I had a lot of unhealthy relationships in my life, particularly around codependency. So that's where I relied on other people for my own emotional happiness, and also trauma bonds, where because I myself had, gone through a traumatic experience in my childhood, I was particularly drawn to other people who'd also gone through or experienced their own form of trauma. And, when two people have experienced trauma at a young age, you can feel this very strong pull and this instant connection, which is not healthy at all. And navigating a relationship like that can lead to no boundaries whatsoever on both sides. And, that is not a healthy relationship at all. I have to say that also for myself, my love language is that how I communicate to people and how I show that I care about them and how I love them is that I do things for them. I'm somebody who's very loyal, very consistent, always shows up, and I do things for people. I give, often to my own detriment, and that can lead to a lot of one-sided connections where I'm the person giving and giving and giving, and I get either very little or sometimes nothing back in return whatsoever. And if you are in a relationship like that, the other person will overstep your boundaries consistently, and that is not healthy whatsoever. So now that I can recognize that I have had a lot of unhealthy relationships with no boundaries, in the past, I'm going to talk through some of the tools that I've put into practice in my own life. So the first thing that you have to do is internal work on yourself, really. You have to sort of practice self-awareness, understand your own needs, identify your own needs and limitations, tune into your own feelings and gut reactions to understand your own physical, emotional, and mental limits. You have to recognize your own self-worth. You have to give yourself permission to prioritize your own well-being and comfort. And you have to, recognize and fully accept that you are worthy of having boundaries yourself. And the last thing you have to do is name your limits. So that is being specific about what type of behavior from other people that you're no longer willing to tolerate or put up with. So the next step in setting healthy boundaries is around communication, and that is clearly communicating your own boundaries. And that involves being very direct and clear. Avoid any kind of ambiguity whatsoever. state your own needs and expectations honestly and calmly. So that's really practicing mindfulness, avoiding confrontation, using I statements. So for example, if someone has mistreated you or overstepped or encroached or pushed on your boundaries, it's saying, you know, what you did made me feel this way. It's not, you know, being confrontational or getting into an argument or an altercation with someone. It's, you know, I feel upset, I feel angry, I feel disappointed, etc. And also using positive language. Focus on what you need rather than what you don't want, and that can sort of de-escalate and create a less confrontational tone, you know, in conversations or, you know, in communication, you know, on text message or on a phone call, really. So once you've communicated your boundaries effectively, you know, the next step is to be consistent and then enforce those boundaries, and that is a really key element, particularly because if in the past you've set a precedent, you know, of not having healthy boundaries in a relationship, then the other person will be used to violating your personal boundaries. So you really have to be consistent in enforcing your boundaries, because otherwise, you know, they won't be effective, and they won't actually take you seriously. Another thing you can do is to establish consequences. So, you know, if someone is a repeat offender where they continually, you know, push your boundaries, you can clearly communicate to them, you know, this is what will happen if you continue to push my boundaries, if you continue to disrespect me, if you continue to, you know, call me a specific name, then I will, you know, end the conversation. So there will be a consequence to somebody continuing with a type of behavior that you're no longer willing to accept. And, you know, if that actually continues, then you may have to follow through. So that comes under the enforcing your boundaries. So if a person continually pushes your boundaries, then you will have to, you know, enforce what you've previously stated beforehand in terms of what the consequences will be in terms of their actions. You know, for me personally, I have had experiences in the past where certain people have pushed my boundaries. You know, they've either disrespected me directly, you know, by something they've said or done, or even indirectly where people aren't self-aware and mindful about the language that they use. And in the moment, perhaps I've not addressed that, and I've kind of missed that opportunity to address that head on, and I've gone away and I've ruminated on it, and I felt unhappy, not only with the person who has, you know, pushed my boundaries, but also unhappy with myself in the fact that I didn't address that at the time. I wasn't direct, you know, about this is my boundary, I'm not willing to accept this type of behavior. So that goes back to that self-awareness. You have to identify within yourself first what is your boundary and what type of behavior you're not willing to tolerate. And then once you have that self-awareness, you're able to really pick that up in the moment and address that with the person head on. And really what that does is that nips it in the bud, and hopefully it won't be an issue again in the future. It's important to say that if you are somebody like me who has had difficulty in the past with, you know, having healthy relationships with people or setting healthy boundaries, once you actually make a change to enforce healthy boundaries with people, it can be something that is difficult at first for your loved ones to navigate because they're not used to this new behavior or this new personality. And you know, it may take time, but you have to prioritize your own self-care at the end of the day, and your own happiness and your own mental health, because that's what's the most important thing. So setting healthy boundaries with people, it does take time. You have to be consistent. You may have to keep at it, especially if there's somebody who continually pushes your boundaries and doesn't respect them really. So you have to be resilient and consistent in your approach. You know, unfortunately, there are some people who aren't willing to do the inner work on themselves, or they're not able to practice self-awareness, and they will continue to, you know, violate your own personal boundaries and disrespect you, you know, even if you have been very clear and direct in your communication with them in terms of, you know, this is what I'm no longer willing to tolerate. And if somebody continually, you know, decides to push your personal boundaries, then in some instances you may need to end that relationship or end the connection, or at the very least, you know, withdraw for a time. So the last thing that I'll say is that, you know, setting healthy boundaries in relationships is something that is difficult to navigate. But if you are able to persevere and stick with it, it can lead to much healthier relationships that are built on a foundation of, you know, mutual respect and clear communication. And that's something that is very valuable, at least to me. So stick with it. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope that you have found what I've shared meaningful. If you liked it, please don't forget to like and subscribe, or hit that hype button. Thank you so much for watching. Have a nice day. Take care. Bye.